everybody, welcome to this video which will provide you with a sample answer for question 4 on the AQA GCSE English and English language papers for the higher tier. In part 1 and part 2 of the how-to videos, I went through what you needed to do in order to be able to answer this question. So I discussed how you needed to pull out the language features, explain what was suggested by the words in the quotes that you'd chosen, and you needed to discuss the effect on the reader. I also explained about how you needed to compare the two sources, and I gave you a paragraph by paragraph structure for your answer. Now, some of you have struggled with this, so what I've done is I've created my own sample mark scheme for this question, and that is available to download right now on my website. You'll just need to go to the downloadable resources section for the higher on my website, and it's asiaexams.wordpress.com. You can download that for free. So if you have struggled, then please do get that and see if you can use any of those points to help you write your paragraphs. If you have already done it, then here is my top band sample answer that I've written. This is also obviously available right now. You can download that for free too. Now, please do bear in mind that I have probably taken more than 24 minutes to write this answer. So this is an aspirational answer. It's something for you to aspire to, for you to see how to structure your answer. And I wouldn't expect you to be able to write in this greater detail within the exam. However, it really clearly shows you how you can do your PQE paragraphs with your effect on the reader, and it is also good at showing you how to weave in your comparison as you go through. Now, because it's quite an extensive answer, I'm not going to look at it paragraph by paragraph, but I will go through the first 2 paragraphs so that you can see how I compare the 2 sources. Now, I did discuss in the how-to videos which techniques to pull out, and I said always go for facts, opinions and powerful verbs and adjectives. So I have actually pulled out powerful verbs, I've compared those, and I've done the same with facts. But I also had a thought, well, what happens if you guys are in your exam and you can't find opinions, or you can't find a language feature that exists in both sources? So at the end of this answer, I have actually compared and contrasted 2 different language features that appear within the 2 sources, so that you can see how you would compare those as well. So that's also useful for you to have a look at. So first of all, let's have a look at these first 2 paragraphs, and I will show you how I've structured my answer. Oh, trying to whiz in there. Okay, right. So, as I said, I've started my answer with both sources use language features effectively. Immediately I have got my comparison there, and that's what I would like you to start your answer with in the exam. Then I've said, firstly, source 3 uses numerous powerful verbs to depict the extreme danger and pain that Joe is in. That's my point. So I've explained to the examiner, I know that source 3 uses the technique of powerful verbs, and I've explained how they are used. And then I've said the verbs grated and shattered suggest that Joe's leg is damaged beyond repair, and that no amount of help or medical attention will save his badly damaged leg. So I've looked at those 2 verbs, grated and shattered, in greater detail, and I've used my inference skills to suggest what those words mean about the situation that he's in. So I've got my point, my evidence and my explain there. This is where I do the effect on the reader. So I've said the gruesome image of bone being grated helps the reader to imagine the severity of the situation Joe is in, and it adds to the dramatic impact of the accident. So again, it's about creating drama. The vivid images created by these powerful verbs enable the reader to visualise Joe's contorted and disfigured leg, creating a sense of uncertainty as to whether Joe will survive. So we know that verbs and adjectives are used to create vivid images, so I've used that within the effect. And I've thought about how does that make me feel knowing that his leg is being grated and shattered, which is a very unpleasant image. And I've thought, well, it makes me feel uncertain as to whether he will survive. So that's my effect on the reader. So then I've looked at source 2 and I've thought, oh, source 2 also uses powerful verbs. So I said similarly, which is my word for comparison, source 2 also uses powerful verbs for effect. The writer explains that the crowds were thrilled and that the viewing public shouted words of encouragement to Wallander as he attempted his tightrope walk. Now the words thrilled and shouted should be in green because they are my quotes. Okay, so I've got my point and my quotes there, and they are embedded quotes again. The use of the word thrill illustrates the extreme excitement and exhilaration the crowd felt as they watched the deadly act. So again, I'm using my inference skills and being very perceptive and looking at the word thrill and thinking about what that word would show. It could also suggest that the crowd were nervous that Wallander would not succeed in his attempt and were unbelievably relieved when he reached safety. Indeed, the fact that they shouted reveals that they were willing him to survive. So again, it's about really unpicking those words within your quote. As with the crowds, the reader is filled with excitement at the drama of the story and is compelled to read on to establish if the record attempt was successful. Now we know source 2 is generally a human interest story and it's a news article, so obviously the editors want you to read the whole of the article, so that possibly could be a point that you could make in any exam really about that news article, that actually it's compelling you to read on. Okay, so that's my effect on the reader. Now what I've done next, you don't have to do really, but it just ties together your comparison and it shows the examiner that you really are unpicking and comparing and contrasting those language features in both sources. So I've done an overall comparison paragraph here about comparing the verbs. So I've said both sources use verbs to evoke complex emotions within the reader. True. Quite an open statement really, but again it is a comparison. Both source 3 and source 2 create a feeling of nervous anticipation of what the outcomes will be. So that's a similarity between the two sources. However, source 3 has an overwhelming feeling of dread, whereas source 2 evokes a positive and euphoric response in the reader. So what I've done there is I've actually thought about what emotions do they make the reader feel. Is the emotion that the reader feels in source 3 different to the emotion that the reader feels when they read source 2? And I've compared those things. Okay, so again, that's just pushing you up into that higher band. You're being really perceptive in your comparison there. Right, so what I'm going to show you is I'm going to show you the bottom bit now because I didn't compare opinions. What I did was I chose repetition from source 3 and I think I chose opinions from source 2 because I wanted to show you that you could still compare and contrast even if they were actually different language features. So it was my final paragraph for source 3, so I started obviously finally. And I said source 3 uses repetition to convey to the reader the panic that Joe feels when he realises his leg is broken. Okay, he repeats the phrase "my leg" to depict the disbelief he feels at the situation he is in. So we know that Joe is an experienced climber. So again, it could show, we're only suggesting, remember, it's not a right or wrong answer. We're suggesting that he cannot believe that he is actually in that situation and that's why he's repeating that phrase. can't believe that he's actually hurt his leg. And then I've thought about the effect on the reader, and I've said the reader is immediately aware that the situation is deadly, as we understand that it would be impossible to climb to safety with a broken leg. Furthermore, the panic and hysteria that Joe demonstrates when he shouts creates a dramatic sense of fear within the reader, which compels you to read on to establish if he gets to safety. Okay? So I've thought about the fact that he's shouting my leg and how that makes me feel knowing he's in that situation. He's actually at 19,000 feet, unlikely to get help from anybody and can't get out of that situation. So it's about thinking about how you feel as a reader, and commenting on that really. And then, like I've said, I didn't actually pick repetition out of source 2, but I did actually choose opinions. Okay, so I've said in contrast, source 2 does not use the technique of repetition, but does use various opinions to portray Wallander as an unrivalled daredevil. So I've actually compared and contrasted there anyway by explaining to the examiner that I understand that, repetition wasn't used, however, opinions were. And I've said the writer describes him as a king of the high wire, creating a metaphorical image in the reader's mind of an individual who is superior to them. Now, I've thought about what the word king signifies, and I've thought, superiority really. So again, it's about thinking about what is suggested by the words in the quote. This, in essence, highlights the exceptional achievement Wallander has made by completing this walk. And then I've thought the effect on the reader is to feel admiration and astonishment that a fellow human has survived a deadly act. So again, I've got a clear point, evidence, explain, effect on the reader paragraph. And it's just as easy really to compare different techniques across the sources as it is similar ones, to be fair. But it just makes it easier if you just look for facts, opinions and powerful verbs and adjectives, because they always tend to be within the sources. Again, I've finished my answer with an overall comparison paragraph, which again you don't have to do. But like I said, this is an aspirational answer, and this is something that you can think, if you do think of that in the exam, if you do think of a comparison or a contrast that you want to discuss, then you can do that. So if I were you, I would obviously download this from my website, asiaexams.wordpress.com. I would unpick each paragraph and I would look at how it is structured in detail. Then look at yours and see if yours follows a similar structure, okay? If you do have any questions about this video or any of the other videos on my channel, then please do feel free to email me through my website, or you can follow me on Twitter at AQA. Definitely subscribe to the channel because I do add videos all the time for the exam, so make sure you stay up to date with those. And what would be really nice is if you could like this video if you think it's really useful, because it really does give me an indication as to what works and what doesn't. So again, head over to my website asiaexams.wordpress.com and get those free downloads. And thanks for listening.